Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Career Talks podcast. I'm your host, Orlando Haynes, as always, bringing you amazing guests each and every week. But let me ask you this before we get started. When you think about career transitions, career pivoting, have you ever thought about being on a board? That's the topic for today. I have Naomi Kent, the CEO and founder of the Boardroom Company. We're going to dive in deep, so look forward to that.
Hey, thank you. Thanks,
you?
Orlando. Yeah, good. How are you?
Good, doing well.
Good to be here in Tampa.
I know, our first in-person meeting.
I know. In apparently a haunted house, a haunted building,
So
in a podcast
right?
studio.
So I had to pray this out so so the podcast episode comes out great. Yeah. But so appreciative of you and how we connected. We spoke first about a month ago through Zoom.
Yeah.
Obviously through LinkedIn, our connection there, which led us to this in-person conversation. Super excited. Now, I'll admit, I've never thought about the board space as much. But before we dive in, just share with the folks your background, your business, and a little bit about you.
Yeah, so I spent about 12 years at a company called BoardX, and that was from 2002 to 2014. So I spent a fair amount of time working in a company that was building data on board directors, and we were selling this data and this database essentially to the market. So, I was fresh out of college, and my first job actually was entering the data. So I would enter data on board members. And for most people, that seems like a very boring task, right? But I found it quite interesting to see how people's careers kind of ended up, because the people that were in our database were people on these massive boards, right? And so generally they were in their 60s, right? And so, but you could see where they came from. So over the time that I was working there, I really got a genuine interest in careers, and I know you do too. And then fast forward quite a few years later, people would ask me, they'd say, oh, you work for that board company, right? Like, how do I get on a board? And so I'd sit there and I go, well, I don't know. And then I'd say, well, tell me a bit about you. And they'd tell me, and I'd say, well, have you thought about doing this? And then over a couple of years, people would come back to me and say, hey, you gave me that advice. It was great advice. I'm now on a board. And so what I didn't realize was I had learned quite a lot from being at that company and being exposed to all of this information and all these clients. And I now had a lot of knowledge that I could share with people. So fast forward, about 8 years ago, I started working one-to-one with people who wanted to serve on boards. And it's actually a passion of mine. And like you, I'm very passionate about careers, helping people, and really guiding them because, hey, I did some things that were right and I did some things that were wrong, right? We've all made mistakes. And so, for me, it's certainly about helping guide people to, avoid some of those mistakes sometimes too.
So you said something pretty interesting, because the traditional model of boardroom is you go to the executive level, and the next step would be participate in the board, chairman level, et cetera. And so the perception is that's the only model that's out there right now, is you have to hit the executive ranks. If you're thinking about big board positions with global companies and things like that, versus nonprofit boards. And maybe you can talk to the difference about that. So share with us some of the misconceptions about a path to being on the board.
Yeah, I think if you read about boards of directors, you often read about the big companies, Apple's board, Microsoft's board. I mean, these are the largest companies in the world. They're like the Hollywoods, right, of the A-listers, right, of the corporate world. And so if you only see that, I think most people would say, yeah, I can't get on a board. There's no way, right? But what I learned, from the years that I've been working in this field is that there are thousands of different types of boards and companies and different approaches that these boards want to take. And so for a lot of people, they don't realize that actually they do have an opportunity to serve on a board. It's just not Walmart's board, right? Or it's not the Microsoft board. And that's okay, right? There's plenty of other opportunities. You're right, though. I think a lot of these corporate boards, they do require you to have had a certain level of experience, right? So as an example, if you've been a CEO or a CFO, a chief financial officer, or you've run a major division, you've managed a big P&L, your chances of getting onto some of those larger boards is obviously much higher than the next person. However, companies have evolved so much in the last 10, 20 years in terms of their technology, their direction, the market, the consumer has changed, that I think a lot of companies are saying, okay, well, we have 2 former CEOs on our board. We want someone else who's a little different, right? So we might want someone who actually understands the customer, or we might want someone who actually represents the customer. I'll give you a quick example. This is a few years back, but it was a company that was making a baby product. And they said to me, they said, hey, we need someone who knows something about pediatrics. And I just so happened to know a nurse who was in pediatrics. She'd actually already started a business of her own. So she's a little entrepreneurial, right, on the side. But I spoke to her and I said, hey, I think this board opportunity is great for you. She said the same thing, like, well, I don't know. I'm not ready for boards. And I said, well, they need you, and here's why. And for them, it was a credibility, too, to have a nurse on their board who had kind of approved the baby product or formula or whatever it was that they were selling. So if you think about it like that, every company and organization, whether it's a startup, they need people to help them raise funds, all the way through to mid-level family-owned businesses where they need you to be able to kind of maybe work between the family members, right? Because there may be some infighting and things like that, or you may bring some structure to the board. On the corporate side, I think there's a lot more opportunity today than there ever was. Now, on the nonprofit side, obviously that's very different, and this is actually a big piece, a big area I've actually started to do a lot more work in. I'll tell you a quick story, and I'm sure you have a story too. But I was 28 years old. I was working for that board company, right? So I knew a little bit about boards, but I got tapped on the shoulder by a company an organization I was volunteering with, and they said, "Hey, would you like to be on the board?" And I thought, well, I know a thing or two. Yeah, sure, I'll go for it, right? So but I got into my first board meeting, and I was like, what is this, right? This was not what we were taught, right? When we were doing the work we were doing, because we weren't really on that side of it. So it's a bit of a shock. And years later, now looking back, it was actually a really good choice. That board, that organization was a great choice for me. It was a networking organization. They were giving back to actually kids in New York and Brooklyn and the Bronx and places like that. And we got to volunteer, and I enjoyed that. And the people on the board were phenomenal. But years later, I also joined the board of an HOA, a housing association. And that was not a good board experience, right? So like, I thought, well, maybe I just stumbled across this. Maybe everyone stumbles across it. But when I talk to people, everyone kind of has their own story, and they've sometimes wasted time and effort and sometimes reputation, right? Going and serving on nonprofit boards that perhaps aren't right for them. So this is one of the things that I want to do, is teach people how to actually build your career through nonprofits, but to do it the right way.
So much to unpack. So much to unpack there. I got tons of questions, but let me take a step back, and you touched on it in the beginning, and give us a brief overview of what really drove you to start the company, the Boardroom Company, and where you've seen the gap in that and said, hey, I can develop people to use this as a career path. Because again, most folks may not see that. I would say a large portion of folks don't see that, right? And understanding what the criteria is. Is it based on pedigree and overall accomplishments? And so a lot of that stuff we're just unaware of. So talk to us first about what really led you, where you've seen the gap in that, and then some of the gaps and where we're trying to understand what does it really take, and what are they really looking for at the board level?
I think something that really drives me is seeing other people's success. Like, I like that. I like career success. I like it when people take risks and win. I like it when people are they stick their neck out and they offer themselves up for a promotion, or you know what I mean? Like, they're a bit more kind of ambitious. I really like people like that, and I like seeing them succeed. And like I said, I've seen people build their careers on boards. So there are 3 things that I think boards can do for you. Nonprofit, that is. Let's stick to the nonprofit for now. The first thing that it does for a young person is it opens them up to activities and skills that they would never build in their work. So let's say you're a project manager in a huge company like a Deloitte, or you're in an investment bank or something, you're doing project management. On a nonprofit board, they may need to vote in a new CEO or executive director, right, or president. And that's your job to either get rid of the one that's not working and find a new one, or, right, your vote matters, right? If you were a project manager, when would you ever be voting in a leader of a business, right? Or a leader of an organization? Exactly. So now and there's a number of other things that you do in a nonprofit, but that's kind of like a big one that I always think about. And people don't really know until they get on a board just how much they're going to learn. So that would be the first thing. The second thing is I don't think they realize the leadership opportunities that they get on a board. So you have roles that you can play, like secretary, which is the individual that will keep track of the meetings and they'll make sure that things are documented. There's a treasurer role, which is like a financial role. You should have a finance background, but I've seen plenty of people who didn't have a very strong they weren't a CFO or a CPA, and they were able to do the treasurer role. There's a president role. There's a vice president role in some boards, right? You can take on these leadership roles. And I don't know if you found this in your career, but my career kind of sometimes it plateaued. And then you got a promotion, but that plateau sometimes felt like it just kept going and going. And a lot of people go, right, that's it. I'm going to leave. I'm going to go to another company. I'm going to go get more money. And sometimes the opportunity is right around the corner. You have to wait. Sometimes it's not, and you should leave. But for me, I sometimes felt, everything's going great, but hey, but all this good stuff's going on my nonprofit. So it was like a distraction. I was always learning. And I always felt like I was moving ahead because I was on this nonprofit. So for me personally, it was huge. And then the third thing, and this is something I think I didn't appreciate when I was young, and maybe I'll make the assumption that a lot of people don't realize it until they get to their 40s and 50s and they look back. But the network that I built on that board was phenomenal. And I still keep in touch with a lot of those people today. And I do business with them, and we share contacts and we share relationships. And guess, I say to people, the reason why these people on these boards are really interesting people is because they're ambitious like you, right? If you want to be on a board and you want to make it in your career and you want to do other things to upskill, right, yourself, then those people are like that too. And so you're around high flyers, high achievers. They're going to, 40 years old, 50 years old, they're all running businesses. Some of them are on public company boards. I mean, it's an array of people. But when you think about it, how, that's a major, major piece of why I promote it and why it's meaningful to me, is because I really do see the value in it. But like I said, you can choose a great nonprofit and you can choose a really bad one.
Right.
So
speak to us about the demands of one, and I'll share my quick story. I was on the board of Suncoast HR locally here in Florida, took on the role of director of career readiness. And so didn't realize the scope of responsibility that it required. And so after a year of being on the board, I did have to step down because it was conflicting. It was, to be at certain events and things like that. I was like, well, those same events I would be at for the employer, so it would be hard to represent two companies in that space. And so, but understanding the conversations, the people I were around were all either director or VP of HRs in different businesses, benefits. One was the current president. She sits as a VP for New York Life Insurance, and so massive company, right? And so all great people. But it was good, like you mentioned, the conversations and the network. One was a VP who's a VP of one of the local banks here. And so the massive, deep connections that you find out in just one meeting. So imagine being on those conversations on a monthly basis, bi-weekly basis, whatever that cadence is, you start to understand the level of achievement that these people have, and it rubs up on you really, really fast. And so speak to that about the responsibilities, because people may see it, it's a great feather in my cap, but wait, there's more, all right? Talk to us about that.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of responsibility. Some nonprofits will take up more time than others. I think it's a very good due diligence. It's good to do your due diligence before you go into any nonprofit, and to find out, how long are the meetings, when are the meetings, what are the expectations, right? Because You, a lot of nonprofits, it's volunteer, obviously, spend time, fundraise. You have to find out, well, how much do we fundraise, right? Because some organizations, it's as low as $1,000 a year, which I don't know about you, but you could probably run a 5K and get that, right? Like, I mean,
Right.
just pull your friends and your neighbors, right? And you could probably get it at least halfway there. But you know, so and then but some are $50,000, $100,000. I mean, these are some of the biggest nonprofits. It goes even higher. But a lot of those individuals are either wealthy individuals or they have companies that are backing them, right? That are making the donation. So you have different types of nonprofits, but you definitely want to find out what is the time commitment, right, to this organization. Another really good thing to look at is who else is on the board.
Yeah.
Because, and I always say this to people, if you're the smartest person in the room or the most experienced person in the room, they're going to give you all the responsibility, right? So if you're going into a board interview and you've got a CPA or you're a finance person, and they say, oh yeah, we need you to do the finance, and you look at the board and no one has a finance background, guess what? You're going to be doing everything all by yourself. So you also have to kind of look at the setup of the board and see, are these people more experienced than I am, or am I coming into this as the potentially the most experienced person? Volunteering usually is something that you decide whether you want to do or not. So, but often there's an event that will happen, like a fundraising event once a year or twice a year. And so you're expected to do some work on that. There are committees you might have to sort of serve on as well. So yeah, you really want to get a good idea if you have the time to do it. But I always say, all the big things that I did in my career, I would probably look back and go, oh, I don't know how I had the time to do that, right? But you did it, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes you kind of have to go, I am really pushed for time, but I know I can make it work, right? And so if you choose the right nonprofit and you do manage your time correctly, right? I think it can work. And actually, 20 years ago, everyone had to go to the nonprofit for the board meeting. Now we're all doing it via Zoom.
Right.
So, you do save yourself a little bit of time with board meetings and things like that.
So let's make a shift in speaking to the audience of the Gen Z community, right? Because I'm sure this is going to be eye-opening for them to see and think that, oh, this is a pathway for me. Because that audience, you may think, may not have enough experience because, again, the traditional model says differently. But speak to us about the opportunities there for that Gen Z community.
Yeah, so I was officially sort of a Gen Z age, right, when I got on my first board. And I have somebody I know is 25, and they just got on their first board. At that age, there are certain types of boards that are a better fit, okay? So again, a lot of people that age will say to me, oh, I know my dad sits on a board. I couldn't get on that board. No, maybe not, right? But there's something called junior boards. So a junior board of a nonprofit is usually made up of people in their 20s and 30s. Often it's to create more of a younger crowd and to bring in a younger audience. I know a lot of the arts associations and arts organizations are doing that because they're just trying to bring in the younger generations so that they get more involved. There's also a number of committees that you can join. I mean, a committee that is kind of not necessarily a board, but it's kind of the next step onto the board. I would recommend doing that too. Again, leadership, networking, you check all the boxes, right? So I would definitely look at that. The other thing I say to people all the time is the opportunity's probably right in front of you. So ask yourself, where do you volunteer? What causes do you care about? Are they aligned with your company and your business and your career? Personally, I'm a big proponent of industry associations, so the HR group that you mentioned, right? So let's say you work in, I don't know, banking. There's probably a Southwest Florida Banking Association, New York Banking Industry Association group. Go volunteer there. Go join as a member, and then get your way, make your way onto the board. If anyone listening works at a really big company, of a big brand name, it's very easy to get on a board. They like big brands. They like big brand representation, so that's good. if you work for a really small company, and I worked for a really small company, I would make the donation myself, and I would, volunteer myself. But again, I did a bungee jump, and I don't like heights, so that's why I made as
Whoa.
much money as I did. And then I did a skydive. So you could. There's ways you can raise money. It's not all about just putting your hand in your pocket, but if you do put your hand in your pocket, it's all tax deductible. So it's not a bad thing. But I really do think that for younger people. And again, I'll talk about my career plateauing, right? So you get into a role, you just come out of college, you're probably not going to see a promotion for a year, maybe two, right? So you can sort of, and some companies provide training and coaching, some don't. Mine didn't. I mean, we did training in the things we were meant to be trained on, but there was nothing really outside of that. And so what can you do, right, to upskill yourself and learn and network and build a reputation in your local community possibly and make networks, in your spare time, right? And I think a lot of companies, they think very highly of it. They think it's a good thing. You're going to get, recognition from your business, especially if you talk about it and talk about what you're doing. I think it's reputable. And like I said, I think the time that you spend on it, as I said, if it's the right nonprofit, it really will make a difference later on. So I think for younger people, it's a great alternative. And if you already volunteer, you already get involved in some company and some organization, and you have an affinity for something, then dive in, right?
So you said something pretty interesting there too about if you work for a large company. So there's ways to leverage the fact that you've worked for a global brand versus going in maybe just on your own personal merit. Which would you say is the benefit of leveraging the company?
I think some of the larger nonprofits will see, if you have a very large company affiliated, they see that probably as a potential for a sponsor. They probably see that. You might do some matching. Some big companies do donations. They match your donation. So if you give $200, they'll give $200. So that's $400 now under your name. So they see that as a benefit. They also, the big companies, they see it as a benefit too, that you're sitting on these boards, that you are representing the company, right, in the community and doing great work. Interestingly, there are companies that will sponsor their people to be on these nonprofit boards because they see so much of the value. And especially, let's say you're a local company in Tampa, where we are right now, right? You're in Tampa, and why not have 4 of your employees all individually sitting on different types of nonprofit boards in the Tampa community? One's networking with the deputy mayor, one's networking with the head of some business and the CEO of this other company. And suddenly you've just tripled, quadrupled your network, right, of your business. And they now know your business's name too, right? So there's a huge amount of value. And so if you do work for a large company, I would ask your manager, say, hey, is there any opportunity for me to serve on a nonprofit board through the business? Like, do they have nonprofits that people serve on? And if they say no, then, go out to find one. But it didn't really, for me, I don't think it's an advantage necessarily. It's just a different path.
Got it. That's really good. So one of the things I wanted to talk about and let us know about the packaging. What does the packaging of yourself look like for a Gen Z versus more of an executive level person?
Yeah, so you do have to think a little differently with being on a board. As I said, there are roles and responsibilities of board members that, if you're like, again, we do the project manager, program manager, right, that you probably won't have those responsibilities on a daily basis. So my first advice to everyone here would be read up on the roles and responsibilities of board members. Once you read it, you'll probably have way more confidence than you do right now, right? So you'll read it, you'll go, oh, okay, yeah, I get it. But essentially your role is to oversee the nonprofit organization. It's a big responsibility, in fact. So your role is to ensure that not-for-profit continues to operate and to do the work that it does. And you might be thinking, well, it's a nonprofit, of course it would just be fine, right? No, that's not true, right? So people leading businesses all the time run them into the ground, right? They spend too much money. They don't bring enough sponsorships in. They make bad decisions. So the board is there to oversee that those bad decisions don't happen. And if they do happen, that we course correct pretty quickly. And also the board are there to be advocates of the organization, right? So, again, you're an art organization. They would hope that you might bring some friends down to, an orchestra or an or a theater or whatever it is, and that you would support the organization in that way. Fundraising, obviously, to make sure the organization continues to operate, because you need systems, you need lights, you need, right? Like everything
Right.
costs money to make sure that these nonprofits continue to operate. And then one of the other things that I think with Gen Z, how they can approach it is you should have a certain level of professionalism, right? So again, if we just take the role of this board, a board is, again, overseeing the business, overseeing the organization. You do have to come with leadership qualities, right? Executive presence. So that's, how do you dress? How do you stand? How confident do you seem? Can you articulate what you're trying to say when you talk about what you would do on a board? Are you a good communicator? I actually have a list of the top. I'll share it with you, actually. Maybe you can, and I'll share it on my podcast because I do with my clients, but I'll share it with you as well. It's the top attributes of highly successful board members.
Okay.
And one of them, and I think it'd be good to read, but for everyone here, but one of them is obviously good communication. And that means if something's really complex, being able to describe it and explain it in a way that's easy to understand. So, don't confuse everybody. You don't have to use big words. It's not about that. There's also one about being humble, but confident, right? So they're not shouting about their achievements. They're a bit more kind of laid back, but they have that confidence with it as well. And then other things like they understand the role and responsibilities. And so, yeah, definitely check out those attributes. But you want to bring that to the table. You want to show people what you can do. You want to be able to write properly. You want to be able to write good emails. And I know when I came out of college, I didn't even know how to write an email, right? It was all text, right? Actually, was it? Yeah, I think I had a phone. But anyway, it was a while ago. But yeah, I think it's not just your experience and your role, because I don't know if, again, let's take the project manager. Project manager would be really good person to have on a board when there's an event, right? So, hey, I know how to project manage. I'll help. I'll oversee this, or I'll oversee that, or I'll be there on the day, and that would be really helpful. So you kind of have to think, where am I? What am I good at? And then how can I relate that to the board? And then how do I appear confident? Do I speak well? Do people have confidence in me to do this role, right? So there's a few things there that are needed. I would recommend people have a resume of some kind that's ready to go, right? Because they will say, send us your resume. But and I'm sure this is how you got on a board, because this is how I got on a board as well, which is someone said, oh, Naomi's got to be on our board, right? And so people often ask me and they say, well, that's not good. It's just friends of friends and who knows who. I said, it seems that way, but let me explain why it's that way. It's that way because if we're going to serve on a board, some of the biggest decisions are going to take place on that board. And if you make a mistake, or if I make a mistake, this nonprofit potentially could go under. So I have to trust that you make good decisions and that you have high integrity and morals and all the rest of it, and that you are going to be looking out for the organization and you're not looking out for yourself. And so if I know you, I'm going to know that's what you're like, so I'll recommend you. So that's why boards, there's a lot of recommendations that happen, because you kind of have to know someone. It's not just knowledge and yeah, I was the CEO of this company. Someone's actually got to say, yeah, we can work together. Like, he's a good guy, right? So I think if you make a good impression and you have good people that can recommend you, then I would definitely seek those people out as well.
That's good, because what I take from that, I mean, there's a lot to take from that, is as someone looking for a board seat, is looking for the skills gap in that, right? Not just the prestige of it, the vanity of it, but where can I really come in and make a value add to that community based on the skill sets that I have? And if there's a gap, the duality doesn't necessarily probably help. But you did mention earlier, if someone, you're the only CFO, that's all coming to you. So you want to be able to have a partner, I would assume, in that to be like, okay, if things are getting overwhelmed, I can lean on you to support some of the work we do and some cross-functional things. So I think, and let me know if I'm wrong in this, the board structure is ideally just a mini company in overseeing the larger company, right? And
That's right.
so having those corporate skills, those ability to communicate right effectively, lead, presence, et cetera, is such a value add for folks. But before we land this plane, right, because we can go on, there needs to be a part 2, folks. So if you see in the comments, we need to have a part 2. But share with the folks where they can connect with you, consume your information, and learn more about pursuing an opportunity being on the board.
Yeah, so my website is www.theboardroomco.com. So theboardroomco.com. I also am on LinkedIn, so if anyone wants to connect with me on LinkedIn. By the way, I do a lot of work on LinkedIn, and I know you and I kind of connected on LinkedIn. It's one of my favorite platforms, and I'm sure for careers, you talk about it a lot as well. For boards, it's really important that you have the right profile, right? So everyone here, take a look. If you are really serious about being on a board, take a look at your profile and then look at the role of the board member. Like, are these two overlapping in any way, or are these just two completely different people, right? So if it says, to be on a board, you have to be, CEO succession, right? So maybe put something about how, you've been involved in a succession plan or something like that. So really make sure it lines up. I also say to people, look at your headshot on LinkedIn, right? Again, it's this executive presence. If I went to LinkedIn and, a lot of people who come out of college, I think actually a lot of people come out of college and understand brand a lot better than people when I came out of college. But some people, they just got any old picture there. They were at a wedding and they cut,
Right.
they cut themselves out. They look good, right? Don't get me wrong. But they've cut themselves out, and that's great. But that's not a LinkedIn headshot. And
Correct.
so just make sure that you're putting your best foot forward at all times, because you are being analyzed, right, for the role, and because it's such an important role for an organization, and even a junior board. You're representing the nonprofit or the corporation, right? So they really want to make sure that it's a good one. So anyway, side note, but yeah, so I have I work with people one-on-one, and I also do group sessions, and then I also have an online platform where you can just consume whatever kinds of content, and it's all on my website. It's on the program section. But I think it's really important. Some people don't want to sit with me for an hour, and don't blame them. No, some people don't need to do the full program, but they just want to consume pieces of the content. I also have a newsletter which is on my website as well, so that people can just jump in, and I share tips and tricks on what to do. And sometimes they are things that I've always known about, and then other times I meet board members and it just triggers something, and so I kind of come out with it. I'll share one of them with you because I think it's good for anybody at any age, actually. I think, and this actually goes for people looking for jobs too. So everybody thinks they have to have like an elevator pitch, right? Like, hey, I'm going to go meet this person, and I've got to have my whole life story ready. And what I've found is when I meet really successful board members, I mean board members who've been board members for years, right? They sit on multiple boards. When I meet them, they never give me the life story. Instead, what they do is they go, tell me about your business. What's going on at the moment? How are you dealing with tariffs? How are you dealing with the current this? Or we've got a new mayor. How has that affected your business? And it's raining today. How is that affecting your business? Right? Like they're just thinking about everything, and they want to know what's going on. And when you say, actually it's impacting it pretty bad, and we're trying to figure out what to do. And now they come forward. Well, you've thought about this, and I run this other business, or years ago I ran this business very similar to what you do, and this is how we did it. And they're giving you advice on what to do. And so I think about this a lot, and I think, how can we, instead of thinking we have to tell everyone everything about ourselves, why don't we just try and fix their problems, right? Why don't we try and provide solutions, demonstrating what we could do, right? So Doesn't matter what role you're in, right? You know, you can say I'm an junior analyst in an investment bank. You know, you can still ask. So, you know, what stocks, what shares are we looking at this week? What did you think about the stock market? I want to work with someone like that who's smart, who thinks critically, who's asking me really good questions. Not the guy who just comes along with the personal sales pitch, right? So I say this to people all the time. I'm like, stop trying to sell yourself and try and show them what you would do in a role or on a board. And I feel like that will get you a lot further and help you build a connection with someone, right? So,
last question. Why do you do what you do?
There's a couple of reasons. I really like seeing people succeed. I like it's a thrill almost, right? Like people text me and say, hey, I got an interview, let's chat. So we chat. And then they get on the board. That's a huge win for me. It's almost like I won too, right? So I like to win and they like to win. And so when we both win, that's great. I would say also I've always been fascinated by careers. And I've always been interested to see how people ended up where they ended up. And that was kind of from some of the early days when I was looking at people's bios. So I like to sort of understand trajectories. I've also been a big proponent of interns and internships. So in every company, I always set up some kind of internship, and I still keep in touch with a lot of the interns. They're great people. They've gone on to be, you know, managing directors of companies now, right? So that's awesome. I like to see that. And then when it comes to boards, I would say the biggest driver for me is that there's a lot of bad information out there. So there's a lot of companies that are trying to sell a sort of like, hey, pay me $100 a month and I'll get you on a board. I mean, it's just not, it's like saying, pay me and I'll get you a job. Like no one can get you a job except for you. If that business existed, we'd be billionaires, right? You know, we'd be getting people jobs left, right, and center. It's just not a thing, right? So anyway, so there are companies like that people are saying, scratching their heads going, well, what is this? Is this easy? It seems really easy. It's not easy. So I try to paint a more realistic picture of what is really going on and how to get on a board and some of the things you should stop doing and some of the things you should start doing. So it's kind of my quest to just continue to kind of share the right information, hopefully, for both people who are very young and are really ambitious and want to get onto boards, and then people who are thinking about retirement and thinking, you know, yeah, I probably want to serve on a corporate board at some point. But biggest piece of advice to anyone is start early, start young. Do not wait until you're, you know, getting your retirement party, you know, you got your retirement gift and your retirement party from your company, and then you're like, right, it's board time. It was actually board time 15 to 20 years before that. And so when you do retire, everyone has board experience except you. So you really want to get ahead of the game. So
I love it. Yeah. Naomi, thank you so much for your time, your wisdom, educating us all. The founder and CEO of the Boardroom Company. I appreciate you so much for joining me today.
Orlando, thanks for having me. Really good to see you.
You
all
too.
Right, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.